When you think of the American Civil War, you probably think of huge battles, famous generals, right? But it was so much more than that. It was this deeply human story that really tested what America was all about. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into that, really get into this nation's trial by fire. We'll look at everything from the life of a single soldier all the way up to the huge issues that tore the country in two. Let's dive in.
Okay, so to really get a grip on this war, we've got to start with the people who actually fought it, all 3 million of them. So let's just forget about the big strategies and the famous generals for a second. We're going to go right down to ground level, into the mud, to see what life was really like for them, day in and day out.
Just listen to this. It's from a Union soldier named Theodore Garish. What's so striking here is he's not talking about the horror of battle. He's talking about just the absolute misery of camp life. It's such a powerful reminder, right? For these guys, the fight to just survive started long before they ever even saw the enemy. And this right here, this lays out the brutal, shocking truth. You'd think the biggest danger would be enemy bullets, right? Nope, not even close. It was disease. I mean, you have thousands of guys packed into these camps, terrible sanitation, dirty water. It was a perfect storm for things like dysentery and typhoid. Get this, for every 1 soldier killed in battle, 2 died from sickness. Just think about that.
So who were these guys, really? Well, for the most part, they were kids, so young. Over 2 million of them were 21 or younger, and a lot of them were just farmers who'd probably never been more than a few miles from home. You know, they didn't always sign up for some grand, noble cause. Sometimes it was for their buddies or to represent their hometown, maybe for a little adventure, or hey, just for a steady paycheck. They were just regular people suddenly caught in this crazy new life of hurry up and wait, endless drilling and marching.
Which brings up a huge question, doesn't it? How on earth did things get so bad that a country would send millions of its own young men off to face all that? To answer that, we have to go back in time, way back, and look at this massive, ticking time bomb at the very heart of the country.
And Thomas Jefferson, wow, he just nailed the problem with this metaphor. He said slavery was like holding a wolf by the ears. You can't hold on, but you can't safely let go either. That was it, in a nutshell. The founders knew it was wrong. They knew it went against everything they said they believed in, but they were terrified that trying to get rid of it would just destroy the brand new nation. So they basically just kicked the can down the road.
And for the next few decades, that's what politics was all about, trying to keep that wolf contained with one flimsy patch after another. You had the Missouri Compromise in 1820, then the Compromise of 1850, then the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 54. Each one was this frantic attempt to just keep things from blowing up. But they were all just band-aids, you know? They didn't actually solve anything, and in a lot of ways, they just made things worse, especially with things like the Fugitive Slave Law, which really enraged the North. And well, eventually those band-aids just ripped right off. The whole thing failed, and it failed spectacularly. On the one hand, you see this incredible, heroic resistance, the Underground Railroad, just unbelievably brave people risking everything to help others find freedom. But on the other hand, you had sheer violence. The Kansas-Nebraska Act basically led to a mini civil war out on the frontier, a period that got the name Bleeding Kansas for a very good reason.
So where does all this lead? Right here. This was the final straw. When Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860 on a platform of stopping slavery spread, the South just snapped. They saw it as the end of their way of life. South Carolina went first, and then others followed. And just like that, as this newspaper headline screams, the Union is dissolved. That fire bell in the night Jefferson warned about? Yeah, it was now a full-blown, raging fire.
So the war begins, and for years it's this brutal back and forth, which brings us to a major turning point in the conflict. By the later stages of the war, the North's strategy had changed. It wasn't enough to just beat the Confederate armies anymore. No, the new plan was to break the South's ability to even wage war and to crush its will to fight.
This new approach had a name: hard war. And the general who became famous, or infamous for it, was William T. Sherman. The idea behind it was, well, it was simple and it was absolutely brutal. The goal was to make life so unbearable for civilians in the South that they would just give up. It meant you didn't just target armies, you targeted everything that supported them. Farms, railroads, factories, everything.
And Sherman's famous march to the sea, well, it shows you what this looked like in practice. The scale of the destruction is just staggering. Look at these numbers. $100 million in damage. I mean, that's an almost unimaginable amount of money back then. His army destroyed 300 miles of railroad,
literally bending the hot rails around trees into what they called Sherman's neckties. This wasn't just a battle, it was total economic warfare.
And if you want to know the thinking behind it, just listen to the man himself. Sherman put it in the starkest terms possible. We are not only fighting armies, but a hostile people. That is absolutely chilling, isn't it? He wasn't making excuses. He was saying, point blank, that everyone, old, young, rich, poor, had to feel the hard hand of war. And as terrifying as it was an effective strategy. It helped break the back of the Confederacy.
Okay, so after 4 long, bloody years, the war is finally over. The fighting stops, and out of all that destruction, something new starts to grow. It's a period we call Reconstruction, and it came with this huge, incredible promise, a promise of a new kind of freedom. But, as we'll see, it was also incredibly complicated.
And before we go any further, we have to talk about this number, 180,000. That's how many African American men enlisted and fought for the Union. Think about that. These men, known as the U.S. Colored Troops, fought with unbelievable bravery. They weren't just fighting for a country, they were fighting for their own freedom, their own liberation, and their contribution was absolutely critical to winning the war.
And with the Union victory came a legal revolution. I mean, a complete rewriting of the rules. You have these 3 powerhouse amendments: the 13th, which abolished slavery for good, the 14th, which granted citizenship to everyone born here, and the 15th, which gave African American men the right to vote. On paper, this was world-changing. It was supposed to be a whole new beginning.
And for the 4 million people who are now free, that freedom wasn't just about not being enslaved anymore. It was about opportunity. And the number one thing they wanted, education. The ability to read and write was seen as the key to true freedom. And you had groups like the Freedmen's Bureau helping to set up thousands of schools all across the South. For the first time in many of these places, there is a real public school system.
But, and this is a huge but, all of that hope, all of that progress was about to run into a wall. It was a tragically short chapter, because that promise of Reconstruction was met with an organized, violent, and determined effort to tear it all down.
And this really shows you how that happened. Look at the difference between the promise and the reality. The promise was citizenship and voting rights. The reality? Things like poll taxes and literacy tests designed to stop black men from voting. The promise was a chance at economic freedom. The reality? A system of sharecropping that trapped people in debt and poverty, pretty much just another form of bondage. And the final nail in the coffin was when federal troops who were there to protect these new rights were pulled out of the South. After that, the whole thing just collapsed.
So, it all comes back to this one massive question. To what end did 620,000 soldiers sacrifice their lives? Now, the war did settle some things, for sure. It ended slavery, and it decided that the nation was indivisible. But that incredible promise of Reconstruction, the promise of real equality, of economic justice, of a voice in government, that promise was broken. And its collapse left behind this unfinished legacy, a set of questions and struggles that, in many ways, the country is still wrestling with today.